I'm going to be reading today from the Zohar. This is from the chapter Vayera, from the portion of the 5 books of Moses. Each one is divided into a separate, many pieces, and in each of these separate portions, they have many chapters in the Zohar. So, chapter 29 of the portion of Vayera, in verse 389, it says, "And the Holy One, blessed be He, took the pure soul from the throne of glory, so it would shine on the body." It says, "Your head upon you is like Carmel," like the Mount Carmel. It says, "The hair of your head is like purple, the soul that's taken from it. The king is held in the galleries. The body is imprisoned in the grave and consumed in the dust. Nothing remains of it except for a scrap of rot. But from this, the entire body will be rebuilt. And when the Holy One, blessed be He, visits the body, He will tell the earth to cast it out. And the earth shall cast out the dead." In chapter 29, verse 414 and 415, it says, "It was a great honor for Egypt that God passed through and not an angel," as it says in Shemos. Shemos is Exodus chapter 12, verse 12. And then it says in this, where I'm reading now from the Zohar, "Because it's not the same to be caught by a king as it is to be caught by a simple man. There's no nation that is as defiled with all sorts of impurity as Egypt, of which is written, whose flesh is as the flesh of donkeys." That's from Ezekiel 23, chapter 23, verse 20. Continuing in the Zohar, because they're suspected of sodomy. They issued from Ham, one of the children of Noah, right, who did what he did to his father, who then cursed him and his son, Canaan. Did not the Holy One, blessed be He, have an angel? Did not the Holy One, blessed be He, have an angel or messenger descend to take revenge on Egypt, as He had done to Ashur, who was the son of Shem, as it is written, the children of Shem, Elam and Ashur, from Genesis 10:22. That's the quote from there. Continuing in the Zohar, it says, "And Shem was a high priest who was blessed, as it is written, blessed be Hashem, the Elohim of Shem." That's again from Genesis 9:26. "Thus Shem received blessings and attained superiority over his brothers. Of them is written, then the angel of Hashem went forth and smote in the in the camp of Ashur." That's in Isaiah 37, chapter 37, verse 36. So the revenge was accomplished by a messenger. That's the cat. So so much more so with Egypt, the most impure of all the nations. Nevertheless, he said, "I am not an angel." Chapter 34, verse 478, it says, "In the year 66," verse 477, "After 6.5 years, after the 60th year of the 6th millennium, the daughter of Jacob shall be remembered, and 6 years will pass as the duration of the remembrance, totaling 72 years after the start of the 6th millennium." So in the year 66, this is verse 478, "In the year 66, the King Messiah will appear in the land of Galilee. He's called Mashiach ben Joseph. He will therefore appear in the Galilee in the possession of Joseph. A star from the east will swallow up 7 stars from the north, and a flame of black fire will be suspended from heavens for 60 days. A star from the east will swallow up 7 stars from the north. A flame of black fire will be suspended from the heavens for 60 days. Wars will be begun in the world from the north, and 2 kings will fall in these wars." It's amazing. We finally have a king of England, and You could even say, I'm just making a comment, it sounds almost like Russia and Ukraine. Anyway, verse 479, and all the nations will be united against the daughter of Jacob in order to drive her out of this world. And of that time it is written, and it is a time of trouble for Jacob, but of it he shall be saved, as it says in Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 7. Continuing from the Zohar, then all the souls shall be gone from the body, they'll have to come back and be renewed. And your proof is in the verse, from Genesis chapter 46, verse 26. It says, all the souls of the house of Jacob that came into Egypt, ... were 66. Then in verse 80 of the Zohar in this chapter, it says, in the 73rd year, that is 7 years after Messiah ben Joseph was revealed, all the kings of the world shall assemble in the great city of Rome. And the Holy One, blessed be He, will shower fire and hail and meteorite stars upon them until they're wiped out from the world. And only those kings who did not go to Rome will remain in the world, and they shall return and wage other wars. During this time, the king Mashiach will declare himself throughout the world, and many nations will gather around him, together with many armies from all corners of the world. And all the children of Israel will assemble together in their places. Verse 481. When a century is completed, the Vav will join with the Hay. This is the Tetragrammaton. And they shall bring all your brethren out of all the nations for an offering to Hashem. That's from Isaiah chapter 66, verse 20. Continuing with the Zohar, in verses from 481. It's not really a verse, it's more like a little section. Anyway, this is when they shall all be gathered from the diaspora, the children of Ishmael, who are the head, also the leaders of all the forces of the Klippa, which is the other side, or the beyond, like what makes the shell be a shell, from the right, as Rome is for the left, shall join together at that time with all the nations of the world who have not gone to Rome and come to Jerusalem to wage war, as it is written in Zechariah chapter 14, verse 2, I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle. And then in the Psalms, by King David, chapter 2, verse 2, it says, the kings of the earth stand up and the rulers take counsel together against Hashem and against his anointed. And also it says in that same psalm, but verse 4, it says, he that sits in heaven laughs. Hashem has them in derision. All right, verse 482 from the Zohar, or, portion 482. They're more like little paragraphs. But I'm reading like quotes that are there too, not all in full, but plenty. After all, the forces of the other side, the right and left, are wiped out of the world. The small vav, which is the yesod of Zeir Anpin, which is the foundation, or the holiness of Zeir Anpin, the channel of the flow, like the charge, the power flow. Being in charge is going through the charge, and having good in charge, for example. So the Vav, the connecting letter in the Tetragrammaton, will join the Hay and renew old souls, namely all the souls that were in a body since the creation of the world, in order to renew the world, which is Malchut, which is the dignity, sovereignty of completion. As it's written, let Hashem rejoice in his works, and may the glory of Hashem endure forever. That's quotes from the Psalms, chapter 104, verse 31. And it says here in the Zohar, which means that in order for the Hay to join the Vav properly, two of the letters of the Tetragrammaton, let Hashem rejoice in his works. Let him bring his works down, referring to the renewed souls into the world, so they all become new creatures and all the worlds are united. And then verse 483, or paragraph 483, it says, happy are all those who shall remain in the world at the 6th millennium and enter the Shabbat, which is the 7th millennium, because that is the day for Hashem alone to join the Hay properly and call new souls in order to bring them into the world. This refers to the souls that have not yet come into the world, together with the renewed souls that have been there from the beginning, as it is written, and it shall come to pass that he that is left in Zion and he that remains in Jerusalem shall be called holy, that is everyone that is written for life in Jerusalem. That's from Isaiah chapter 4, verse 3. And the reason I shared that is because these are all quotes about something that I learned from Tiffany Jean Barsati. She's a doctor and a reverend, and she marries the nervous system with the spiritual, she marries the soul with the personality. She takes the subtle nervous system with the subtle spirit, which is the soul, right? The subtle spirit and the subtle nervous system. So she takes the subtle of the body and the nervous system, which we would call the personality, right? And then how we respond, our facial expressions, how things subtly become compilations of, and then also the soul, which is the subtle of the spirit. So she takes the subtle of both. So she says we're doing this for the same, I call it l'shem yichud, or not I, but in Judaism we call it l'shem yichud. And this is conscious transforming. In other words, we become that power flow I mentioned earlier, that flow, that charge, to unite that with consciousness, to be consciously feeling life, is to be making a dwelling place for awareness as an experience. And there's the reticular formation, which is as I mentioned, the awareness and the connectedness in the mind that's always kind of vaguely on. And then there's the vagus nerve, which is the moderation and the action. That's the 10th cranial nerve. It's number 10, right? So there's a lot of interesting layers here when you look at the subtle, how it really matches, you would say, the subtle spirit or the subtle nervous system, because it's response versus reaction for both of them. It's about mastery versus immaturity, control versus, basically control leads us to respect. So we begin to respect the power that has the higher control. For example, there's a natural calm. We start to realize we're in flow, and we trust ourselves because we're less in the nitty-gritty personal detail stuff. We're not being affected by wounds like we're so vulnerable, or the attachments, and we tend to do less avoidance tactics, and we're not seeking as much instant gratification, so we're not wasting our time and then getting us triggered for feeling like a waste, if that makes sense. And I'm sure it will for the right people or for everybody. And so we make our choices better and we make room for programming our own self. And that's how we stay aware and connected in action. It's to be aware in action. It's to be acting out. It's to be in the flow. So there's a higher vantage point of union. We would call this the God self. There is mindful, it's like mail slot, you get the messages. You're being mindful. You're saying, I'm getting the message to hug this person or to not. I'm getting the message to go there at the right time. I'm getting the message to bring that thing to that place and to say that thing. Right, and then it's also the embodied choice maker. In other words, I'm getting the conscious awareness that I have a choice here to do an action, choice making, to make a choice and be embodied and feel the effect of it in the experience by not just doing it and then covering our eyes, or our ears. And being a receiver channel, in other words, being a channel, like having an antenna almost that could receive information. And then because this means that we're in this presence, the Tetragrammaton stands for what was, is, and will be, the presence, right? Is this evolutionary flow. It's evolving. The evolution is a flow. It's always changing. So that instead of saying this is point A, this is point B as sequences, you say, okay, there's a sense of surrender, trust. There's a higher will, and that's what gives us grace. And then specifically, if we look at the neck area, Because here I'm talking about a lot about messages and acting on it. Like the body has to go through the neck to get to the head. And we also talk over here. And in Judaism, we know about the luz bone. Which is like in the other chapter, it said, when I was reading the Zohar, it said about the body will rot and then the one little piece will be rebuilt. The whole body will be rebuilt. I learned that it's from the luz bone. While we're dreaming, we still have the luz bone, and that's where like Jacob constructed Bethel, the altar, in Luz. And we also have the carotid artery and the jugular vein. And very close by is that alta major, or like auric, encompassing field of magnetism, right, our charge. And we also have the throat chakra, where we could talk from our soul or our personality, right? And then we can be the godly mouth. We can listen for God's mouth. Like the waist and below is rooted in the ground. And then we can recycle energy through the feet. And my feet just cracked. I like twisted them as I said feet, like stretch them. So that, like, in other words, this neck is the crown, the third eye, right? Like in all those other areas I mentioned. And it's like balancing everything. And then you have the other end, or like this upper end, the like neck up. And then you have this like feet or waist down, which is kind of like the waist. It's like everything below that is going to be rooted. We may not want to take a lot of things in below the umbilical cord. And then through the feet is where we could like recycle energy. Like there's almost like the waist system is when we're walking, we're walking our path, we're doing things. And then obviously in the whole space in between, we call this kind of like the Zeir Anpin. We refine our emotions in this channel. We feel the pain of life. We're not running from the pleasure, so I'm not talking about that. And we're not like, struggling with nice sensations. It's more like we have to refine the lack of control I mentioned earlier, that we need, that control leads to respect. We respect and trust the system. Thanks for spending this time with me. I hope that you enjoyed, and I wish you a good new year. Vitality, alignment. Presence.